Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. We close out the year with discussion on the U.S. airstrikes against terrorists in Sokoto State, Nigeria, an operation the Nigerian government says it was part of by providing military intelligence to the U.S. at the direction of the U.S. President Donald Trump and the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. The U.S. Africa Command conducted strikes against Islamic terrorists in Sokoto State in the very early hours of Christmas Day. According to the U.S. Africa Command, its initial assessment is that multiple ISIS terrorists were killed in the ISIS camps. It says the U.S. Africa Command will continue to assess the results of the operation and will provide additional information as appropriate. Specific details about the operation, it says, will not be released in order to ensure operational security. Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tugar, speaking on Channels Television, explained that Nigerian authorities are actively engaged in structured security cooperation with international partners, including the United States, to tackle the ongoing threat of terrorism and violent extremism, and that the partnership has resulted in the precision airstrikes on the terrorist groups in the northwest.
Nigeria has remained consistent in its approach, which is, like the statement says, to work with all partners that are committed to the fight against terrorism, irrespective of what religion, who the victims are, whether they are Muslims or Christians, and irrespective of what type of terrorism, be it terrorism being carried out in the name of one religion or the other, or indeed even banditry. So this is an ongoing process. We have been working closely with the Americans. This is what we've always been hoping for, to work with the Americans, work with other countries to combat terrorism, to stop the death of innocent Nigerians. So those who thought that there was some foot dragging, or the government wasn't doing enough, it is a clear indication that we are committed and we are prepared to work with all comers.
Okay, so we understand that there was some reconnaissance done before the strikes. Were we also involved in that, and how so?
It's Nigeria that provided the intelligence. I was on the phone yesterday for 19 minutes with Secretary of State Marco Rubio of the United States. We spoke extensively, and we agreed that I was going to speak with President Tinubu, for President Tinubu to give the go-ahead. And I did speak with him, and it was agreed also that the statements that would follow would be statements that will show clearly that it is a strike against terrorism and that it is part of the ongoing joint operations between Nigeria and collaboration between Nigeria and the United States, and that it is not to do with religion, it's to do with protecting Nigerians and innocent lives of either Nigerians or non-Nigerians.
As for the timing of the strikes, he said that they did not have anything to do with Christmas. And the reason all of this made the news is because the U.S. President Donald Trump made an announcement on social media saying, "The United States launched a powerful and deadly strike against ISIS terrorist scrum in northwest Nigeria, who have been targeting and viciously killing primarily innocent Christians at levels not seen for many years and even centuries." It goes on to say, "I have previously warned these terrorists that they did not stop the slaughtering of Christians, there would be hell to pay, and tonight there was." The words of President Donald Trump. According to an unnamed U.S. military official, more than a dozen Tomahawk cruise missiles were fired from a Navy ship hitting two insurgent camps in Sokoto State. The U.S. Secretary of War then warned on social media after President Trump's announcement there will be more strikes. The attacks come weeks after U.S. President Donald Trump labeled Nigeria a country of particular concern, citing attacks on Christians in the country. This was later followed by a partial visa ban. Joining me now is retired director of the Department of State Services here in Nigeria and also security consultant, Mr. Dodeye Arikpo. He joins us from our studio in Abuja. Dodeye, thank you for joining me on the program today.
Thank you, Amarachi. It's such a pleasure to be with you today.
Nice to finally, get you on this last episode of Diplomatic Channel before the end of the year. And interestingly enough, Christmas was quite eventful here in Nigeria, as you already know, since you are in the security circles. U.S. President Donald Trump made good his promise to go after those terrorists in Nigeria, and his first target was the terrorists in Sokoto State. Let's talk about the nature of this attack. It happened right in the middle of the night. The U.S. government provided us a video of the missiles as they were leaving the ship on the waters, West African waters, and as they moved to their targets, we didn't see exactly where they landed. Usually, those videos are made available either to the press or to the governments of both countries, but that did not happen. Do you think that these attacks really did happen? Do you think that they hit their targets in Sokoto State?
Well, you know that the U.S. does not carry out attacks that they've not planned for. Obviously, you can be sure that they hit their targets. The President of America would not be making categorical statements if he wasn't well informed by his military that those targets were hit, and like it was described, they were precision targets, or rather attacks. So obviously, those targets were hit.
But there are reports that came out shortly after that. After the whole, noise over the targets, over the attacks and everything, and the strikes. The Guardian UK did come out with a report saying that the area that was targeted was a plain farmland, and that there were no areas were hit. There are no reports of casualties or the casualties of war resulting from the airstrikes, even though much later, I think in Nigeria, a number of media houses reported that there were casualties. People of Sokoto State and the communities where the strikes were said to have hit did say that they did witness, those strikes landing. What do you think we should believe? Should we believe, that there were really no targets hit, or that, there were these attacks and, the reports that we're seeing online as well about people who are admitting to the fact that there were missile strikes on certain places in their communities were hit by these U.S. strikes? Do you think we should believe them, or what exactly do you think we should believe?
If you followed this saga, Barachi, I'm sure you would understand the reason why we are having very conflicting stories. Everything has been kept quite close. Our government hasn't said much. Neither has the American government said much too. I believe this is a strategy to keep giving these surprises to these terrorists. And so if we are getting conflicting stories, it's simply because of the nature of the operations. But I feel that the best people to believe will be the government. If the government says that the targets have been hit, and obviously we can see there's been a lull or quiet from the terrorists, and then obviously those targets were hit.
The U.S. President, Donald Trump, is the one who made the announcement about the attacks. From my understanding, Nigeria provided the intelligence for the airstrikes, for the missile strikes, and yet it was the U.S. President who made the announcement. When I listened to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, it sounded like, this was a joint operation, Nigeria and the US were in on this. They both planned the targets. They carried them out, with the knowledge of the Nigerian government as well, and with the permission of the Nigerian government as well, because the Minister of Foreign Affairs says he was on the phone with the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. He was also on the phone with President Tinubu to get his go-ahead for the strikes to happen. Why do you think it was just the US governments that had made the announcement? Do you think it was supposed to be a joint statement by both countries?
Well, considering the fact that it was a joint operation, according to our Foreign Affairs Minister, it could just be, well, the US president's propensity for, what I call it, drama, to come up with that announcement. But it could also be an agreement between both parties that the US will be the ones announcing it. It was good at least that our government also came out to confirm after the US president's pronouncement that they were also involved. I think it shows too that we actually knew about it, so it doesn't take anybody by surprise. But the important thing is both countries have come out at this point to say, yes, this was something we did jointly. And I think that's fine.
I know you're trying to be quite economical, with the truth, because for someone of your caliber, you do understand, how the information and intelligence, flows between the different cadre of security operatives in the country. And I know that as a security person as well, there's some information you cannot divulge because of the sensitivity of the issue. But Nigerians are trying to understand here. Pete Hegseth says, there will be more strikes to come. Who exactly is guiding the American government, in these airstrikes? Because once again, the report by The Guardian is quite worrying. It says that the strikes did not hit anyone. It landed on an empty farmland. But what is being spoken about on the ground is that the Nigerian Air Force mistakenly bombed an area just hours away from the same place last Christmas, killing at least 10 people.
Well, like I said earlier, Barachi, these allegations, or rather these reports, have not been confirmed. I would rather stick with what the Nigerian military, or rather the Nigerian government, has given out until it is confirmed that what has been given out to the public is actually true, or rather it's actually false. I would rather stick with what the American government and the Nigerian government have jointly put out. Like you said, all these are stories. We've still not been able to confirm them. I am very sure that in the next few days, some of these things will unravel. Instead of us making allegations and counter-allegations or going ahead with reports that are still not confirmed, I'm very sure that following this strike, obviously more revelations will come forth. So let's wait and see. That's my take on this, really.
Do you think that these strikes were carried out because the U.S. government believes Nigeria is not doing enough to go against these terrorists?
No, I don't think so. I think it's rather the U.S. government's support for our security, or rather for our efforts. It's not because they don't think we are doing enough. Obviously, sometimes I must confess that the political and maybe ethnic and religious complexities of Nigeria hamper some of our operations. But I think that for America, that had initially not shown this commitment towards our fight against terrorism, now coming in to help, I think it's a show of trust and support for our security efforts. So it's a good one.
It is a good one, but it kind of, is a slant, beg your pardon, or against, the Nigerian security forces. President Trump had made it seem like the Nigerian security forces, the army, the military are not doing enough on the ground. When they held the hearing for the president's labeling of Nigeria as CPC, one of the suggestions given was that the police, that the military and the soldiers are doing the work that the police is supposed to be doing, because this the job of protecting civilians, in these communities is overwhelming the army and the Nigerian soldiers, because they are supposed to be fighting external forces and not trying to fight internal forces in the country. What do you make of some of those suggestions that were made then? And do you think that those are suggestions that the Nigerian government has imbibed, making the police more effective in these areas? Because down here in the South, what we see most of them doing is, protecting the roads, going after robbers and things like that, but we don't really see a lot of police activity in the Northeast or in the North in general.
If you recall, the Minister of Defense, the new Minister of Defense, had made several allusions to that fact, even when he was being cleared by the Senate, or when he was being screened by the Senate. I think that over time, maybe our police hasn't been matching up to his responsibilities, but with the new change in defense administration and all that, I'm sure there'll be a change that we will likely see. Also, for me, I think with the movement to America by the team from Mr. President that went ahead to meet with several top government officials in America, those things would definitely have come up, and I'm sure that going forward, a lot of these things will change, and we'll likely see a change in strategy.
One of the military, the Islamic clerics, Sheikh Gumi, did speak out after the strikes hit Sokoto, and he was warning the government that this could, turn things worse in Nigeria. I wanted to ask your thoughts on what it is that he said. He had made, several remarks, of course, about the terrorist attacks. And then there's some Christian clerics have also come up and said Gumi needs to be arrested for the things that he said, saying that, Nigeria, of course, might be facing a more serious problem with, terrorism and, with what the U.S. government has done. We would end up being at war and things like that. I wanted to get your thoughts on what he said.
Sheikh Gumi's opinions, as weighty sometimes as they are, is just his own opinion. I'm sure there are many people who don't agree with his opinion, and obviously terrorism has done a lot of harm to Nigeria. And so anybody at this point supporting or in any way seen to be alluding to the fact that what is going on against the terrorists is bad, is not a friend of this country.
You have the Christians who are crying out and saying that they're being attacked, they're being targeted, in these terrorist attacks. On the 24th of December, there was an attack on a mosque in Maiduguri. The Muslims also came out to say, we're also being attacked. And, the government has also tried to douse tensions by saying that both Christians and Muslims are being attacked. At the end of the day, Nigerians are dying, in the north. And this politics we seem to be bringing into security, into the insecurity problem, is making it difficult for people to decipher through the noise what exactly is being said and what exactly should be the action plan. What do you say?
The whole idea of managing this or, handling the narrative can't be all military. I think different strategies have to be adopted. The NSA has pushed for a non-kinetic approach. Several approaches will need to be adopted, especially the sensitization of the populace, especially in those areas affected. An engagement of the people, probably in the proper employment approach, or things that could give the people some level of security that does not allow several people to get into this, because obviously in places where such terrorism thrives, you can't rule out the fact that there are local people also involved or who can be accomplices. So I think that different approaches need to be adopted to manage this narrative. That way it gives the people more confidence that the government is actually looking out for them.
What is the responsibility of the state governments, of these states that have, high terrorist attacks in them, where Christians and both Muslims are being killed? What should be, their own approach to this? Because a lot of times when we see both kidnappings and so on, there's ransom being paid in the background, even though they keep saying there's no ransom being paid. But with the last kidnap, we saw, a video of the terrorists saying, that they were the ones that paid, the government paid the ransom for those children to be released. What do you say to state governments where there seems to be some handshake going on between the security agents, the government itself, and these terrorists?
What you must understand is that the terrorists use a lot of propaganda. I think that sometimes our state governments or the government at the center doesn't seem to be able to have managed their information. And that way, they can match the propaganda of the terrorists. Again, like I said, a lot of approach must be taken towards confidence building, where the people feel more secure and actually feel that government is doing something to end this. State governments must be able to complement what the federal government is doing in engaging either Christian and Muslim leaders, engaging those communities that are affected in ways that they show not just empathy, but show a clear approach to delivering them from this pain. And there are several things they can do, which is helping them, either giving them adequate security in those areas, or making them understand that they are part of this war. Because when the people are detached from the plans of the government, then obviously they would not be able to do it. The society, or rather the people themselves, have a role to play. And so we must be able to put ourselves in the position where government engages the people effectively to know their role. That way we can work together as a team, both government and the people, to be able to end this.
Retired Assistant Director of the DSS and Security Consultant, Dodeye Arikpo, thank you for joining me on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you very much, Amarachi. I'm grateful.
Here's a recap of other discussions in diplomatic circles.
The Federal Republic of Somalia reaffirms its absolute and non-negotiable commitment.
Somalia is leading a growing international backlash against Israel over its recognition of Somaliland as an independent state, following the Somali Prime Minister's statement on Friday that the region is an integral, inseparable, and inalienable part of Somalia's sovereign territory, and rejected Israel's recognition as unlawful.
To its sovereignty and the unlawful step by Israel.
Following its war against Hamas in Gaza, Israel has been seeking ways to displace Palestinians from the territory. A proposal in March found that the United States and Israel had contacted Somaliland with proposals to settle displaced Gazans in the area, promising support in terms of finances, diplomacy, and security. The move was immediately rejected by the people of Gaza and international community, including the African Union, the Arab League, Nigeria, and Egypt, as a violation of international law and tantamount to crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing.
And without any legal or political effect under international law.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky are now in the final stages of talking, adding, "We have the makings of a deal." The meeting, held in Mar-a-Lago, is discussing President Zelensky's own revised version of a 20-point peace plan, which began as a 28-point U.S. proposal, which Zelensky claimed was 90% ready. It also covers issues such as territorial concessions and security guarantees. Earlier, Trump said he had held a good and very productive call with Vladimir Putin, The Russian side confirmed it lasted over an hour, and the two would speak after Zelensky's meeting as well. Presidential aide Yuri Ushakov said the leaders had agreed that a ceasefire proposed by the Europeans will only prolong conflict and that Kyiv needs to be bold.
Thank you very much.
Cambodia's defense minister T. Siha says a newly signed ceasefire agreement with Thailand would pave the way for the release of detained Cambodian soldiers and allow displaced civilians to return home, following weeks of deadly border clashes. The agreement was signed on Saturday at a border checkpoint in Thailand's Chanthaburi province by Mr. Siha and his Thai counterpart Natafon Narkafanit, bringing an end to nearly 20 years of fighting along the disputed frontier. Siha stressed that the deal would not disturb ongoing border demarcation efforts. He also said Cambodia and Thailand have agreed to strengthen the role of the ASEAN Observer Team in monitoring and verifying the implementation of the ceasefire and related measures. Tensions flared earlier this month along the Thai-Cambodian border. Thailand reported several soldiers and civilians killed during evacuations. Cambodia said 15 civilians were killed and 76 injured, while up to 422,000 people were displaced by the fighting.
And that's the program this week. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you in the new year.